welcome everyone. My name is Melissa Goodstein, and I am the president of the New York Association of Collaborative Professionals. And I'm so honored that you're joining us for our collaborative chats where we learn and connect more deeply with our NYACP members. And today I have the pleasure of chatting today with Dr. Randy Heller. And Randy is a new board member. She is also the past president of the Collaborative Association of South Florida. Did I get that right?
Collaborative Family Law Professionals.
Okay, great. Thank you. And she is really passionate about the work that she does. And I'm really excited to learn more about Randy and for her to tell us a little bit about her story. So welcome, Randy. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Melissa. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So Randy, if we can just start, where did you grow up? Where's your family from?
So I was born in Brooklyn and raised in Queens until I was in high school. And then part of my narrative and story is that my parents divorced and my father moved to California and my mother and I moved to Florida. And I ended up spending the next 40 years of my life in Florida. And
Wow.
About 2 years ago, Memorial Day will be 2 years, I decided to come back home to New York City. And so here I am.
Right during the pandemic, you made that move. Wow.
I did. Actually, it was my silver lining in the pandemic because I recognized throughout the pandemic how I could work remotely and serve
Wow.
clients in a lot of different geographic locations. So I became licensed in New York City New York State and Connecticut, and maintained my Florida license. So I was able to move my clients from Florida. They were already working remotely, so they were
Wow.
that it didn't matter where I was as long as I was available to them. And so I
Wow.
moved my Florida practice to New York City, and here I am.
Wow. That's after a 40-year absence, that must have been quite a change, right?
It was quite a change. And as I said, silver lining in the pandemic, I have my daughter and her family, including and not limited to 3 grandchildren, are in
awesome.
Connecticut. So
Wow,
I
wonderful.
am able to be closer to family and serve my clients and participate in this wonderful New York Association of Collaborative.
Yeah.
So there's
Well,
a lot of good that came out of it.
yeah, well, we are so fortunate to have you as a member and really welcome you. You've done so much work for us. I didn't mention that Randy also does our newsletter, which is a fantastic way of also connecting with our members and learning about all the great things that our organization does. So thank you for that, Randy, too.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I've been grateful to the welcome I've received from New York. So it's really nice.
So you spoke about that you're a child of divorce, and I'm wondering, did that, is that what led you to this path of working with divorced families and individuals? Can you talk to a little bit about what led you to this path of working in the collaborative process?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, the answer is yes. I come from a very high conflict family, where I can tell you when my father was moving out, I was only, I want to say 12 and a half or so at the time, and was relieved. I remember the morning as if it was yesterday that he was moving out, and I was grateful because there was so much fighting and so much violence. And I remember very early on in my life, and I can't exactly pinpoint the time, but I know I was young. I was walking to school. It was after a big conflict that my parents had. And I was saying, there has to be a better way out. There has to be a way out of this. And making a decision, maybe early on in my life, that I was going to get away from that, live a different life than that, and now help families to do the same. And so as a therapist, I was working with couples who, as a couples and marriage and family therapist, you oftentimes see couples who aren't going to make it in their marriages. And, as I say to them, it's not my job to keep them together. It is my job to help them figure out where they want to be at the end of the process and to know that they're making the best decision they can. And so I began working with these couples, trying to help them to find a peaceful way to divorce, raise their children, and co-parent. And so I would sit with them as a therapist and try to help them to come up with agreements that they felt that they could live with. And I would actually be successful at that. And they'd leave my office and they'd feel empowered and they'd feel like, okay, maybe we weren't good at marriage, but maybe we could be better at divorce. And then what would happen is they would consult with their attorneys, and usually they were litigating attorneys. And my phone would start ringing and they would say, my attorney said if I have my children more, I could pay less money, or I could have my children and get more money, or this isn't right, or this isn't right. And I started realizing that the attorneys who they were working with, and in all due respect to attorneys, weren't doing anything to promote peace. And I really wanted to help promote peace with these families. And so I became a mediator. And as a mediator, I thought, okay, I can't work with the couples as a mediator who I worked with in marriage counseling, but perhaps I could help couples to come to amicable agreements that were credible and reliable and sustainable. So I would do that. And yet I felt insecure about that. I didn't know enough about the law, and I didn't know enough about finances. And although as a mediator, we're not charged with advocating or giving them advice in any way, but I couldn't even really educate them about the things I didn't know. And so I began thinking, wouldn't it be great if I could pair up with an attorney and a financial professional and help these couples in a peaceful way? And so I started studying and learning all I could about how to do that as a therapist and be effective. And then I discovered collaborative divorce. And truth be told, I thought it was my idea, but Stu beat me to it. And I just became passionate and entrenched in the process. And that was back in 2004. And I went on to research and write my doctoral dissertation about collaborative practice and the mental health professional working in that arena. And the rest has become my past, my present, and my future.
Wow, so that's so interesting that you kind of visualized what kind of role that you would like to play, and this role was like existed, and you visualized it, and it was there. So that's just so powerful, and so the empathy of going through a really difficult and challenging, divorce as a child, and to have that foresight to kind of turn that pain into like an action to help. That's just so powerful, Randy.
And it's so right on that you say that, Melissa, because I say to people, with each family that I help, it helps me to heal. It really does. So it's not purely altruistic. I like to think that it is somewhat altruistic, and it is, because this is really, I believe, my mission. And at the same time, it is healing for me too, because I really want to create a different world. And I think we can interrupt this terrible cycle of divorce that we have by helping people to learn that there is a more peaceful way.
So you mentioned, Randy, some maybe perhaps they were role models. You mentioned Stu Webb. Can you talk to a little bit about who your role models were as you entered into this field and leaned on to support the work that you do?
Yeah, I can tell you, yes, Stu Webb, to me, he's a remarkable, remarkable man, and how he also turned his adversity into this passion that he has for helping families. I don't know how much you know about Stu's story, but Stu was a very powerful litigator, and he would go home every day and he would recognize that he may have won in court, but he was destroying families. And he really, really was scathed by that. And so Stu, becoming a Buddhist, recognized that there was a better way to help families. And so he rallied all of his colleagues. He was very well respected, and he rallied all of his colleagues and taught them that there was a better way. So I would suggest, if there was any role model in this movement for me, it would be Stu, and the way one single person rallied now thousands of people all over the world to believe that there is a better way to help families. And then really he created this collaborative community, which has trickled down to New York, and I experience it here, where it's become a family, where people from all over the world come together, and they are a family of people promoting peaceful resolution. And it permeates everything that they do. I remember going to my first IACP, the International Academy of Collaborative Professionals, their forum. You know, we have forums every year. And I remember going to my first one in 2006, and I was a stranger, much like I was when I came to New York. And everybody was warm and welcoming, and I was beginning to do my research, and people couldn't be more helpful and wanting to get me participants and wanting to participate in my study and be a part of transforming the way in which mental health professionals do this work. And so I would say Stu, his cohort, Ronowski, who I've had the honor of presenting with on many occasions, and people like Woody Moston and people like Jacinta Gallant, and all of Stu's, let's just say, disciples or students who have learned from him, and all of you and all of my colleagues. So we learn from each other and we grow from each other with each other. And so I would suggest that all of you are my mentors, my role models, and I hope to be the same for many of you.
Thank you for that, for sharing that. I mean, listen, we can all learn from each other. And what really resonated with me about Stu's story was that his Buddhist spirituality and, was so discordant with his practice, his day job. And if he can learn, instead of working against, working with, what possibilities and what hopefulness could arise from that when you work with and not against. And using even words like, instead of adversary, my counterpart. It just that whole shift of a paradigm is just so transformative.
Yeah.
Be a part of that movement is just really special. It really is.
It is. And I love being in the presence of my collaborative colleagues, because there is an aura, and we could call it a movement, and there is an aura of spirituality and peace and just wanting to help families in a different way.
I definitely see where your passion comes from, and it shows in the work that you do and what you bring to our organization, Randy. So moving back, since our job is kind of, it could be pretty stressful sometimes. Like, what do you do to kind of de-stress? Is there a typical thing that you do or to help you support your work and clear your mind and help you stay centered?
Yes, very definitely. There are many things that I do, and I would suggest that it's a practice. So we have to really, really implement a practice to be able to balance and manage all of the stress in life. So even before collaborative practice, working as a therapist, I would have to find a way to separate myself from my work so that it didn't become fully absorbed in my life. So it starts with morning meditations. I begin my day with morning meditations and breathing, and either try to do some yoga, take a walk, do some exercise of some sort to kind of get my body moving and my mind and body connected. Good nutrition. I really try to stay focused on healthy eating, and listen, I'm not perfect, nobody is, but trying to be mindful about that. And also something that I learned very long ago and have continued to implement throughout the pandemic is separating my workday from my the rest of my life. And what I mean by that is there has to be a beginning and an end. And as a therapist, sometimes, when I began as a novice, as a therapist, I was on call 24/7. I had a beep. It was in the days where we had beepers.
Oh, the beepers. Oh my God. Yes, I remember.
I was fielding emergency calls all the time.
Right.
And I was
Oh my
finding
God.
that it was really, really disabling me from being effective. And so I had to really find ways to set those boundaries. And so, no, I don't have a 9-to-5 job. However, I do set more clearer boundaries with clients and separate myself from my work to the degree that I can. And what I mean by that, even in the pandemic, I find myself working at the computer, doing a lot of remote work, and I do it in a separate area of my home than I live the rest of my life. So there's a beginning and an end to my workday. And as I said, interspersed with balanced exercise, nutrition, yoga practices, and then somewhat of a social life as well.
I really like that. It's a great takeaway, having a dedicated space and having dedicated time for those boundaries. That's really important. You did mention that you like to cook. Is there a dish that is a signature one that willing to share with us?
Yeah, sure. Actually, during the pandemic, I've gotten better at cooking because,
Yeah.
as we all know, eating out wasn't as feasible. So my favorite, most simple recipe ever is a recipe that I learned from my stepmom, actually. And it's called mustard crusted peppercorn salmon. And so the way in which you make it is you take a slab of salmon. It could be any size. It could be a small piece. It could be a large piece. You coat it with Dijon mustard, a nice thick coating of Dijon mustard. You sprinkle a thick coat of peppercorns, cracked peppercorns on the top. And you put it under a broiler on broil, and you cook it for 15 minutes. It doesn't matter what size the salmon is. You cook it for 15 minutes. It makes a thick, beautiful crust, and the mustard and the peppercorns keep the salmon moist.
Wow.
And it's absolutely.
Wow, that sounds delicious.
Simple 15 minutes, maybe a 5-minute prep, and you're done.
15-minute meal. I love it. Okay.
And that's what I like, keeping it simple.
I like simple. Simple is always, for me, simple better. Yeah,
I want to circle back for a minute on what I said about boundaries. So boundaries are not only helpful for me. What I find is that boundaries are helpful for my clients as well. Because the boundaries and the space between my clients and myself give them the opportunity to know that they can manage things that they didn't know that they could. It can be very seductive to think that we need to be there all the time for our clients. And when we empower them with the notion, as is the philosophy of collaborative practice, that they can make decisions for themselves, that they have the competence and the ability to find their way, they end up doing a whole lot better. And so they can take care of themselves, and I can take care of myself, and then we can collaborate and help each other. And that's it.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering, did that experience come from a mistake, or can you talk a little bit? I mean, there's no mistakes in life, really, if you look at it in a certain perspective, but was there a moment or something that happened in a collaborative matter that turned into, it was a mistake, or something happened but turned into one of your biggest lessons? Is there something that you can relate to us and share?
Yeah, I can tell you that I suppose it comes out of my experience that I shared about being a child in a high conflict divorce. And my biggest Achilles when working in these family matters is the children. And so I am dedicated to doing whatever I can to minimize the conflict and help these children who may be experiencing the fallout of their parents' conflict. And I remember working on a matter where there was allegations of domestic violence. The parents really weren't working well together, but they did come to the collaborative process. And we as a team, grandiose as it may have been, thought that we could definitely help this family, and more importantly, help the children. And so we took it on hesitantly because of the incidents, not only allegations, but incidents of domestic violence. We took it on in the efforts of developing an immediate parenting plan where the children would be safe, the parents would separate immediately, and the children would be safe. And we thought that we could really help the parents to collaborate while the children were in a safe space. And the parents were nesting at the time and moving in and out of the family home. And we really thought we were going to help them move through and learn a better way and be more peaceful. And what we found ultimately was that we as professionals really wanted it more than they did. And they made commitments to us that they didn't follow through on. They really weren't focused on their children. They were focused on each other and getting each other back and proving each other wrong. And they really didn't live up to their part of the collaborative agreement. And it made me realize that when we want it more than the clients do, we really can't be helpful because we're working harder than them. And to my point, disempowering them to take the actions that they need to take to create peace in their lives. And so I've learned that the responsibility is on me as a collaborative professional to do my job effectively and utilize all of my training and all of my skill, and at the same time, empower the clients to do their work as well. So I would say that is my greatest lesson learned.
So really powerful, that engagement and that buy-in to the why they're there and the adhering to the principles of why they even led them to do this collaboratively is really important for the successful outcome. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Back to your work with, because you are a relatively new member of NYACP, I'm just curious, is there a memorable experience that you want to share with us in since becoming a member of NYACP?
Yeah, there's been a lot since I arrived, which hasn't been that long. We had our spring fling last May, and I hosted it where I live. We have a beautiful club room, and I hosted it, and I felt like I was welcoming all of you into my home, and you were welcoming me into your organization, and it just started a trajectory of a great experience with all of you. And each time we have a gathering and we're together, I feel the energy, whether we're on Zoom or in person, although I do prefer the in-person meetings. Last week's bowling event was fantastic.
That was really fun. Yeah.
Fun, and getting to connect with people who I've only seen on Zoom and through the computer. So I would say that becoming a member of the board, being welcomed as a member of the board very shortly after I became a member of the organization. So there have been many memorable experiences, and I just look forward to so much more.
Oh, I'm so happy. So just I'd like to close our chats with really a time for reflection and hopefulness. Where do you hope to be in 10 years, and what do you hope collaborative practice to be? Do you have a certain vision?
Yeah, so I, about 7 or 8, we're going into the 8th year, about 8 years ago, I wrote a course, the syllabus for a course out of my doctoral dissertation for graduate students of marriage and family therapy at Nova Southeastern University in Florida to teach beginning therapists about collaborative practice. And the reason that I did that was because so many couples in marriage and family therapists don't know anything about collaborative practice. And because of that, they can't steer their couples who are, as I said earlier, not making it in their marriages. They can't steer them to a better way to divorce. So I teach beginning therapists how to do this work in the hopes that they will then share and spread the word about collaborative practice. So to that point, my goal is to really spread the word about collaborative practice and help the public and other professionals who are involved in this divorce industry, as I call it, to know that there is a better way. So I became very active with the IACP in their higher education task force, spreading the word to law schools, schools of business, and schools of mental health, so that the next generation of professionals coming out of these schools could really begin to participate in the collaborative world. And to that end, I'd like to continue doing that work and educating that next generation, and to also become more active in the, although I'm very active right now in the IACP, I'd like to become more involved in leadership. And so perhaps a board member of the IACP, and finding my way to continue to spread the word and share this wealth of knowledge with other professionals and the community at large.
I really love that, Randy. I mean, it's like learning a new language and starting right when you're in school, like in the beginning, so that you have that exposure and the skills in which to really approach this work in a different way. And I do believe in a better way in helping families divorce more peacefully. And what a nice ending to a wonderful chat. So thank you so much for sharing your story, taking the time. And it was just really so great to learn from you and where your passion comes from and how that informs your work. So thank you so much, Randy.
And thank you so much for having me, Melissa. And the way that I look at it is, if we can help these families, and it might be a lofty goal, but we're changing the world one family at a time. And that's my hope. And that's my vision.
Well, that's definitely something that I share, and I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. Thank you so much, Randy.
Thank you for having me.